Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. I missed you yesterday. Saturdays, there's so many persons right near us who are using the internet. We're finding a little difficulty on those evenings, so we'll take Saturday night off from now on. Okay, human beings are locked down, and it's easier for you to hear the birds chirping, and there are all kinds of animals running through the streets. In Australia, you can see kangaroos hopping down the streets of the main cities, and mice and moose, mice is not the plural of moose, and moose in some cities, and goats in some cities, and the animals and birds, and they're feeling more free and happy. So let's see what happens. But in the meantime, hopefully the human beings that are locked down are getting to hear some Srimad Bhagavatam and getting a higher taste so they can get pleasure, real pleasure. Srimad Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram. We read it every day, but I never get tired of it. It's the most beautiful glorification of the Bhagavatam I've ever heard. We owe this translation to Gopi Pranadana Prabhu, and myself and Jayadvaita Maharaj edited the English. So I feel very intimately attached to these prayers. That's why I read them every day. Srila Sanatana Goswami's glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidwan Duritaditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Saduta Dayin Adini Chochata Kada Hanamuncha Gadachin Mam Premna Rit Kanta Yospuda. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we left off on the 21st verse of the 28th chapter of the 11th canto. Still in the middle of the Uddhava Gita. Krishna is explaining now Jnana-yoga to Uddhava. Beginning with text 21. That which did not exist in the past and will not exist in the future also has no existence of its own for the period of its duration, but is only a superficial designation. In my opinion, whatever is created and revealed by something else is ultimately only that other thing. Purport. Although all material products, such as our own bodies, are temporary and thus ultimately false, the material world is a real manifestation of the Lord's potency. The basic substance or reality of this world is the personality of Godhead Himself, whereas the temporary designations imposed by the conditioned souls are illusion. Thus we consider ourselves American, Russian, British, German, Indian, black, white, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and so forth. In fact, we are the marginal potency of the Supreme Lord, but by attempting to exploit the Lord's inferior material potency, we have become entangled in illusion. Everything should be properly defined in terms of the personality of Godhead, who is the essential reality of this and all other worlds. Text 22. Although thus not existing in reality, this manifestation of transformations created from the motive passion appears real because the self-manifested, self-luminous Absolute Truth exhibits Himself in the form of the material variety of the senses, the sense objects, the mind, and the elements of physical nature. Purport. The total material nature, pradhan, is originally undifferentiated and inert, but later it undergoes transformation when the Supreme Lord, through His time agent, glances upon it and activates the motive passion. Material transformation thus takes place and is exhibited as the Lord's inferior energy. In contrast, the Supreme Lord's personal abode possesses eternal variety, which is the self-luminous, internal opulence of the Absolute Truth, and is not subject to material creation, transformation, or annihilation. The material world is in this way simultaneously one with and different from the Absolute Truth. Text 23. Thus clearly understanding, by discriminating logic, the unique position of the Absolute Truth, one should expertly refute one's misidentification with matter and cut to pieces all doubts about the identity of the self. Becoming satisfied in the soul's natural ecstasy, one should desist from all lusty engagements of the material senses. 24. The material body made of earth is not the true self, nor are the senses their presiding demigods or the air of life, nor is the external air, water, or fire, or one's mind. All these are simply matter. Similarly, neither one's intelligence, material consciousness, nor ego, nor the elements of ether or earth, nor the objects of sense perception, nor even the primeval state of material equilibrium can be considered the actual identity of the soul. Text 25. For one who has properly realized my personal identity as the Supreme Godhead, what credit is there if his senses, mere products of the material modes, are perfectly concentrated in meditation? And on the other hand, what blame is incurred if his senses happen to become agitated? Indeed, what does it mean to the sun if the clouds come and go? Purport. A pure devotee of the Lord is considered eternally liberated because he has perfectly understood the Lord's transcendental personality and abode, and is always engaged in serving the Lord's mission within this world. Although superficially such a devotee may appear agitated by events in the material world while engaged in the Lord's mission, this does not change his exalted status as the Lord's eternal servitor, just as the exalted status of the sun is not changed even when the sun is apparently covered by clouds. 26. The sky may display the various qualities of the air, fire, water, and earth that pass through it, as well as such qualities as heat and cold, which continually come and go with the seasons. Yet the sky is never entangled with any of these qualities. Similarly, the Supreme Absolute Truth is never entangled with the contaminations of goodness, passion, and ignorance, which cause the material transformations of the false ego. Purport. The word aham mate here indicates the conditioned living entity who becomes manifest with the false ego of a particular material body. By contrast, the personality of Godhead is unaffected by the modes of nature, and thus he is never covered by a material body and never subject to false ego. As described here, the Lord is eternally infallible and pure. Text 27. Nevertheless, until by firmly practicing devotional service to me, one has completely eliminated from his mind all contamination of material passion, one must very carefully avoid associating with the material modes which are produced by my illusory energy. Purport. The word tatapi in this verse indicates that even though the material nature is non-different from the Supreme Lord, as elaborately described in this chapter, one who has yet to conquer material desire should not artificially associate with material things, declaring them to be non-different from the Lord. Thus, one aspiring to be Krishna conscious should not loosely associate with women, claiming them to be non-different from the personality of Godhead. For by such imitation of the most advanced devotees, one will become a sense gratifier. A neophyte devotee who presumes himself liberated is impelled by the motive passion to become falsely proud of his position, and thus he neglects the actual process of devotional service to the Lord. One must have firm and steady engagement in the loving service of the Lord, under the direction of higher authorities. Then advancement in Krishna consciousness will be easy and sublime. 28. Just as an improperly treated disease recurs and gives repeated distress to the patient, the mind that is not completely purified of its perverted tendencies will remain attached to material things and repeatedly torment the imperfect yogi. Purport. Sarva Sangam refers to one's stubborn attachment to material objects of so-called enjoyment, such as children, wife, money, nation, and friends. One who increases his attachment to children, wife, and so on, although supposedly performing devotional service to Lord Krishna, is understood to be either a kuyogi, as described in this verse, or a bewildered neophyte, who has failed to properly treat the disease of the heart called material attachment. If one has repeated relapses into material attachment, he has failed to eradicate the darkness of ignorance from his heart. 29. Sometimes the progress of imperfect transcendentalists is checked by attachment to family members, disciples, or others who were sent by envious demigods for that purpose. But on the strength of their accumulated advancement, such imperfect transcendentalists will resume their practice of yoga in the next life. They will never again be trapped in the network of fruitive work. Purport. Sometimes sannyasis and other spiritual teachers are bewildered by flattering followers and disciples sent by the demigods to embarrass spiritual leaders who were lacking complete spiritual knowledge. Similarly, spiritual progress is sometimes checked by attachment to one's bodily relatives. Although an imperfect transcendentalist may fall down from yoga practice in this life, he will resume it in the next life on the strength of his accumulated merit, as described in the Bhagavad Gita. The words natu karma tantram indicate that a fallen transcendentalist does not have to pass through the lower stages of fruitive activity and gradually be promoted to the practice of yoga. Rather, he will immediately resume his yoga practice at the point at which he left it. Of course, one should not presume to fall back on the facility offered here, but should try to become perfect in this lifetime. Sannyasis especially should remove the knot of lust from their hearts and should avoid falling into the clutches of flattering followers or female disciples sent by the demigods to expose a so-called spiritual leader who is imperfect in Krishna conscious knowledge. Text 30. An ordinary living entity performs material work and is transformed by the reaction to such work. Thus he is driven by various desires to continue working fruitively up to the very moment of his death. A wise person, however, having experienced his own constitutional bliss, gives up all material desires and does not engage in fruitive work. Purport. By sexual association with women, a man is driven to enjoy the female form again and again, and indeed he remains lusty up to the moment of death. Similarly, through association with family and friends, the knot of material attachment becomes very tight. Thus the reactions of fruitive work bind one more and more in the cycle of material defeat. But a learned person, one who is in touch with the Supreme Lord within his heart, realizes the ultimate frustration of the material world and the danger of entering the womb of a pig or dog in a future life as a result of sinful activities. One on the platform of self-realization does not regard himself as an enjoyer of the world. Rather, he regards the entire cosmos as simply an insignificant expansion of the Lord's potency, and himself as the Lord's humble servant. Text 31. The wise man, whose consciousness is fixed in the self, does not even notice his own bodily activities. While standing, sitting, walking, lying down, urinating, eating, or performing other bodily functions, he understands that the body is acting according to its own nature. Text 32. Although a self-realized soul may sometimes see an impure object or activity, he does not accept it as real. By logically understanding impure sense objects to be based on illusory material duality, the intelligent person sees them to be contrary to and distinct from reality, in the same way that a man awakening from sleep views his fading dream. Purport. A sane person can clearly distinguish between a dream experience and his real life. Similarly, a manisi, or intelligent person, can clearly perceive polluted material sense objects to be creations of the Lord's illusory energy and not factual reality. This is the practical test of realized intelligence. Text 33. Material nations, which expands into many varieties by the activities of the modes of nature, is wrongly accepted by the conditioned soul to be identical with the self. But through the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, my dear Uddhava, this same nations fades away at the time of liberation. The eternal self, on the other hand, is never assumed and never abandoned. Purport. It is emphasized here that the eternal self is never assumed or imposed as a material designation, nor is it ever abandoned. As explained in the Bhagavad Gita, the soul is eternally the same and does not undergo transformation. The modes of nature, however, create the gross material body and subtle mind as a result of one's previous fruitive activities, and these gross and subtle bodies are imposed upon the soul. Thus the living entity can neither assume nor reject the soul, which is an eternal fact. Rather, he should give up the gross ignorance of material consciousness by cultivating spiritual knowledge, as indicated here. Text 34. When the sun rises, it destroys the darkness covering men's eyes, but it does not create the objects they then see before them, which in fact were existing all along. Similarly, potent and factual realization of me will destroy the darkness covering a person's true consciousness. Text 35. The Supreme Lord is self-luminous, unborn, and immeasurable. He is pure transcendental consciousness and perceives everything. One without a second, he is realized only after ordinary words cease. By him, the power of speech and the life airs are set into motion. Purport. The Supreme Lord is self-luminous, self-manifested, whereas the individual living entity is manifested by him. The Lord is unborn, but the living entity, because of material, designative coverings, takes birth in conditioned life. The Lord is immeasurable, being all-pervasive, whereas the living entity is localized. The Supreme Lord is Mahanubhuti, the totality of consciousness, whereas the living entity is a tiny spark of consciousness. The Lord is Sakalanubhuti, omniscient, whereas the living entity is aware only of his own limited experience. The Supreme Lord is one, whereas the living entities are innumerable. Considering all these contrasts between the Lord and ourselves, we should not waste time like the foolish material scientists and philosophers who struggle to find the origin of this world by their insignificant mental speculation and word jugglery. Although one may discover some of the gross laws of material nature through material research, there is no hope of achieving the absolute truth by such petty endeavors. Text 36. Whatever apparent duality is perceived in the self is simply the confusion of the mind. Indeed, such supposed duality has no basis to rest upon apart from one's own soul. Purport. As explained in verse 33 of this chapter, the eternal self is neither assumed nor lost, since every living entity is an eternal reality. The word vikalpa, or duality, herein refers to the mistaken idea that the spirit soul is partly composed of matter in the form of the gross body, or subtle mind. It is thus that foolish persons consider the material body or mind to be an intrinsic or fundamental component of the self. In fact, the living entity is pure spirit, without any tinge of matter. Consequently, the false ego, which is generated by the false identification with matter, is a mistaken identity imposed upon the pure spirit soul. The sense of ego, or I am, in other words, the sense of one's individual identity, comes from the spirit soul, because there is no other possible basis for such self-awareness. By studying one's false sense of ego, one can analytically understand that there is a pure ego, which is expressed by the words Aham Brahmasmi, I am pure spirit soul. One can easily understand, in a similar way, that there is a supreme spirit soul, the personality of Godhead, who is the omniscient controller of everything. Such understanding in Krishna consciousness constitutes perfect knowledge, as described here by the Lord. 37. The duality of the five material elements is perceived only in terms of names and forms. Those who say this duality is real are pseudo-scholars, vainly proposing fanciful theories without basis in fact. Purport. Material names and forms, subject as they are to creation and annihilation, have no permanent existence, and so do not constitute essential, fundamental principles of reality. The material world consists of variegated transformations of the potency of God. Although God is real, and His potency is real, the particular forms and names that temporarily or circumstantially appear have no ultimate reality. Gross ignorance occurs when the conditioned soul imagines himself to be material, or a mixture of matter and spirit. Some philosophers argue that the eternal soul, in contact with matter, is permanently transformed, and that the false ego represents a new and permanent reality of the soul. Srila Jiva Goswami replies that spirit is the living superior energy of the Lord, whereas matter is the inferior, unconscious energy of the Lord, and that these two energies thus possess opposite qualities, as with light and darkness. The superior living entity and inferior matter therefore cannot possibly merge into a common existence, since they eternally possess opposite and incompatible characteristics. The hallucination of a mixture of matter and spirit is called illusion. It becomes specifically manifest as false ego, which identifies with a specific material body or mind created by illusion. Clearly, those scientists or philosophers who are embedded in gross ignorance cannot be real scientists and philosophers. The simple criterion of spiritual self-awareness unfortunately eliminates a huge percentage of modern so-called scientists and philosophers who bury their foolish noses in the Lord's material energy without any knowledge of or interest in the Lord Himself. Text 38. The physical body of the endeavoring yogi, who is not yet mature in his practice, may sometimes be overcome by various disturbances. Therefore, the following process is recommended. Purport. Having described the process of cultivating knowledge, the Lord now gives instructions to the yogi, whose body may be disturbed by disease or other impediments. Those inferior yogis who are attached to the body and bodily exercises are often incomplete in their realization, and thus the Lord here offers them some assistance. Text 39. Some of these obstructions may be counteracted by yogic meditation or by sitting postures practiced together with concentration on controlled breathing, and others may be counteracted by special austerities, mantras, or medicinal herbs. Text 40. These inauspicious disturbances can be gradually removed by constant remembrance of me, by congregational hearing and chanting of my holy names, or by following in the footsteps of the great masters of yoga. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, by meditation on the Supreme Lord, one can overcome lust and other mental disturbances. And by following in the footsteps of great transcendentalists, one can overcome hypocrisy, false pride, and other types of mental imbalance. Text 41. By various methods, some yogis free the body from disease and old age and keep it perpetually youthful. Thus they engage in yoga for the purpose of achieving material, mystic perfections. Purport. The process described here is meant to fulfill one's material desires, not to bring one transcendental knowledge. Therefore, this process cannot be accepted as devotional service to the Lord, according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Despite all such mystic perfections, the material body will ultimately die. Actual eternal youth and happiness are available only on the spiritual platform of Krishna consciousness. 42. This mystic bodily perfection is not valued very highly by those expert in transcendental knowledge. Indeed, they consider endeavor for such perfection useless, since the soul, like a tree, is permanent, but the body, like a tree's fruit, is subject to destruction. Purport. The example given here is of a tree. The example given here is of a tree that seasonally bears fruit. The fruit exists for a very short time, whereas the tree may exist for thousands of years. Similarly, the spirit soul is eternal, whereas the material body, even when preserved as long as possible, is destroyed relatively quickly. The body should never be equated with the eternally existing spirit soul. Those who are actually intelligent, who actually have spiritual knowledge, are not interested in material, mystic perfections. I'm going to read that last sentence again, unless there's an objection. Those who are actually intelligent, who actually have spiritual knowledge, are not interested in material, mystic perfections. Text 43. Although the physical body may be improved by various processes of yoga, an intelligent person who has dedicated his life to me does not place his faith in the prospect of perfecting his physical body through yoga, and in fact, he gives up such procedures. Purport. A devotee of the Lord keeps his body fit by eating nourishing Krishna prasadam, by maintaining a clean and regulated life, free from unnecessary anxiety, and by chanting and dancing before the deity of the Lord. When a devotee is sick, he accepts medical treatment by normal methods, but beyond this, there is no need to absorb one's mind in the physical body in the name of so-called yoga practice. Ultimately, one must accept the destiny that has been ordained by the Lord. Providence Ki Jai. Text 44. The yogi who has taken shelter of me remains free from hankering because he experiences the happiness of the soul within. Thus, while executing this process of yoga, he is never defeated by obstacles. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the Supreme Lord has briefly described to Uddhava the essential wisdom of all the Upanishads, with the conclusion that pure devotional service to the Lord is the real means of ultimate liberation. In this regard, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur emphasizes that although Hatha Yogis and Raja Yogis try to make progress along their prescribed paths, they confront obstacles and often fail to achieve their desired goals. However, one who surrenders to the Supreme Lord will certainly be victorious on his spiritual path back home, back to Godhead. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 11th Canto, 28th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Jnana-yoga. All glories to the separation of the soul from matter, subtle and gross. All glories to Sri Krishna, the ultimate philosopher and spiritual scientist. All glories to Uddhava, the perfect disciple. Okay, we'll stop there for our reading and bring out Yi open mic and the airwaves to the cyberspace, to all of those out there listening. If there's any points that stood out that one wants to reflect upon or have further discussion on or inquire about, please be our guests. That was a very intense, clear reading. Shall I start it off? Mm-hmm. Looks like nobody else is going to say anything. Okay. One thing is, no one should be discouraged if this is not so easy to understand or remember or sort through after hearing it once or twice or three times or whatever. When Devahuti inquired from Kapiladev after her husband Kardama just left, and she heard Kapiladev speak the Sankhya philosophy in depth. This started at about the 25th, some place in the 25th chapter of the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he went on to describe different subject matters of the Sankhya philosophy in the rest of the 25th, the 26th, and a good part, maybe a half of or more, of the 27th chapter. And after all that, Devahudi said, "Oh Lord, my dear son, I'm just a simple woman. I can't understand how it is that these subtle energies are merged together, especially intelligence and consciousness. It's beyond me. How can I possibly become detached from those things? Because aren't they both eternal?" Which is somewhat similar to what we just heard, the answer. And Kapila Dev, he said, yes, therefore, you have to hear for a long time, very seriously, from the proper source. So I just took it like in the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes a profound point. He said, one isn't necessarily illusioned in the material world if he is in knowledge and acting properly. And he uses the example of the police. You know, when the police come into an area, the persons who are law-abiding citizens, they don't get into anxiety. They're not fearful. They feel protected. They feel good. But those who are criminal, who have done something wrong, when they see police come, they try to hide and they try to run away to another place. So he's saying that if you're living in the material world and you're engaged in pure devotional service, you don't necessarily become attached to the material world or entangled. Just like an honest citizen doesn't become, implicated just by seeing a policeman. I thought it was a great example. Anyway, So in this way, this knowledge that we're hearing, when we assimilate it and can actually follow it, and better than that, use it within our own selves to preach to our own minds when we need to make sure that we stay aloof from the illusion, which is that we are the body and that these material forms are permanent and of substance. Then we can be happy, even in the midst of the pandemic. Okay, we have some questions from cyberspace.
Okay, the first question is from Rohini Bandana Das.
Rohini?
Rohini Bandana.
Rohini Bandana. Hare Krishna, Rohini Bandana.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Text 29. Does this mean that devotees that stop practicing, even though appearing to be involved in fruitive activities, are actually not? Thank you, Maharaj.
Does this mean that... does this mean that
devotees that stopped practicing,
that devotees that stop practicing,
even though appearing to be involved in fruitive activities,
even though appearing and being involved in fruitive activities,
are actually not?
Are actually not. It can be either. Srila Sridhar Swami discusses this in the purport to 10th Canto, 14th chapter, text 8, very famous verse, Tat te nukambam susamik shamana. He says that even a pure devotee of the Lord may, in the neophyte condition, maintain in the mind remnants of material desires. And the Lord, and therefore may approach the Lord for the fulfillment of some material desire. But the Lord, if the devotee, this is the big if if the devotee is sincere and is actually, even once, surrendered to the Lord completely, meaning without ulterior motive, not to get something, not to become free from distress, or some money, or something, some followers, or some prestige, but actually surrenders oneself to the Lord. From this day, I'm yours. Please engage me in your transcendental living service. That presupposes deep spiritual understanding to be able to do that. But still, even such a sincere devotee of the Lord, when he's in the material world, may still, some material desires may linger in the mind, tendency. So the Lord thinks, well, I'm not stupid. Well, I don't know if he says that in those words, but he says, I'm not going to fulfill these desires, because if I do, then he's liable to come and try to fulfill them again and again, and he'll be lost. So he arranges, through the Supersoul, he arranges that there may be some reaction causing that sincere devotee to do something that appears to be a sinful reaction. But the reality is that once a person's actually once surrendered to the Lord sincerely, then the Lord from that time on takes care personally of that devotee. And so those things that look like they are sinful reactions are actually medicine administered personally by the personal hand of the Lord. So in that sense, it can be that a person who is apparently fallen is actually not. It's not his karma anymore, but it's an arrangement of the Lord to purify him. So he further goes on to say that the reaction, or whatever that activity or appears to be sinful action, is designed to cure the very nature of the desire that caused it. Therefore, Prabhupada used to say, often actually, sincerity is the only qualification. If one is sincere, tries to understand and tries to surrender to the Lord, and then one's success is actually guaranteed. When is another thing. That's up to the Lord. There's another verse. Can you give me that little book, that little notebook that's underneath it's over there somewhere, maybe it's underneath the Gita. Yeah, that one. Yeah. There's this one verse, very, very nice verse. I don't remember the Sanskrit, so I have to, here it is. Nayam Atma Prabhachanena Labhyo Nabedasa Na Bahuna Shutena Yam Evaisha Vrinute Tena Labhyas Tashaisha Atma Vivinute Tundum Swam. The Supreme Lord is not obtained by expert explanations, by vast intelligence, or even by much hearing. He is obtained only by one whom he himself chooses. To such a person, he manifests his own form. Mundaka Upanishad 3.2.3, which is quoted often in Prabhupada's purports. So the whole point of pure devotional service is to become noticed by the Lord to get his attention. And you do that by pleasing his devotee. We may think what we want, but if we are serving in such a way, sincerely, that is pleasing to the devotees, especially the spiritual master, then we've gotten the attention of the Lord. And it's just a matter of time. Next.
This is from Bhakti Paramananda Pete.
Bhakti Paramananda.
Says, Hare Krishna Maharaj. I think it was text 38 or 39 that mentioned how to conquer our anarthas. Please could you read it again, as I missed the method.
Okay. We're going to text 38 or 39?
So yeah, 38 or 39.
38 or 39. The physical body, this is 38. The physical body of the endeavoring yogi who is not yet mature in his practice may sometimes be overcome by various disturbances. Therefore, the following process is recommended. Purport. Having described the process of cultivating knowledge, the Lord now gives instructions to the yogi whose body may be disturbed by disease or other impediments. Those inferior yogis who are attached to the body and bodily exercises are often incomplete in their realization, and thus the Lord here offers some assistance. Text 39. Some of these obstructions may be counteracted by yogic meditation or by sitting postures, practiced together with concentration on controlled breathing, and others may be counteracted by special austerities, mantras, or medicinal herbs. This is text 40. These inauspicious disturbances can be gradually removed by constant remembrance of me, by congregational hearing and chanting of my holy names, or by following in the footsteps of the great masters of yoga. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, by meditation on the Supreme Lord, one can overcome lust and other mental disturbances, and by following in the footsteps of great transcendentalists, one can overcome hypocrisy, false pride, and other types of mental imbalance. So there you have it. He's saying if you're not very advanced, or if you're more or less a pretender, you may get some benefit temporarily, physically, from some material ailment by an exercise or breathing exercises or those kinds of mystic processes. But the best thing is to constantly remember Krishna by hearing and chanting, congregational hearing and chanting the holy names, following the footsteps of the great masters of yoga, hearing the Bhagavatam. The purpose of the purification that comes from the chanting of the holy names, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, Bhava Mahat Dagvagni Nirvapanam, is so that the mind can become attached to Krishna. And of course the holy name is Krishna, so the more you attach you become to the holy name. But generally, the purpose of the chanting to purify oneself is to then learn how to chant properly, without offense. And to do that, you have to hear the Bhagavatam, as we just heard. Thank you for that lovely question.
There's one more.
One more.
From Lily Blaylock.
Hello, Lily. Hare Krishna.
She says, Hare Krishna Maharaj. We read today that, quote, one must have firm and steady engagement in the loving service of the Lord under the direction of higher authorities. Then advancement in Krishna consciousness will be easy and sublime. End quote. This may be a little off topic, but Carter and I were wondering if you had any advice for those who are interested in starting their own reading groups to study Srila Prabhupada's books.
Yeah, do as we are doing. It's very simple. Just start to read, on Facebook or whatever medium you want to use, and just start to read regularly. Take any book and read it, and and give invitations to people, and gradually it will grow. There's one very nice devotee, and I can refer you to someone who's doing this that can give you guidance. Her name is Vilas Manjari. You can. Let me see. She's a regular listener, a hearer. Matter of fact, she listens every day. And she has developed her own reading groups. So she can give you advice how to do that.
Lily said, thank you so much, Maharaj. Haribol.
Haribol.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, glories to Prabhupada.
And this is one other thing from Rohini Nandan Das.
Rohini Nandan.
Yeah. He says, thank you for the wonderful answer, Maharaj. Can I clarify a small point? If I understood correctly, if once fully surrendered, such a fallen devotee may appear to willingly act sinfully, but actually it is all inspired by the super soul to purify him? Thank you.
Well, it can be. It's not mechanical. It's not that just anybody that says he's a devotee, or the prerequisites, according to Sridhar Swami in that purport, have to be sincerity. So you say he may be appearing to willingly do the wrong things, but it's not actually willingly, it's done by Krishna. That's not necessarily true. That's not automatically true. The person has to have sincerely, without motivation, without ulterior motives, surrendered to Krishna. Then it's accidental. The fall down will be accidental. And they are easily rectified. And that's described in the purport to Gita, Bhagavad Gita, 930 and 931, those purports. Apichet sududachado bhajate mamananya bhak sadureva samantavyak samyak vyavasito hisaha. Even if one commits the most abominable activity, if he's fixed in devotional service, he is considered by me, Krishna, to be sadhu. And that's the only verse in which the word sadhu, only time that the word sadhu was mentioned by Krishna. Samyak, completely perfect, completely purified. So then in the next verse in the purport, or rather later on in the purport of that same verse, Prabhupada says that one shouldn't deride a person who has accidentally fallen. Because if you do, you become in a worse position than the person who's fallen. It's an offense, actually. But the person who is willfully This verse pertains to a devotee who is accidentally fallen by past bad habit and the strength of the material energy against his will. But if one willfully and repeatedly sins, that means offense on the strength of the holy name consciously, then he's not to be considered saintly. And as long as that weakness is there, there may be apparent fall downs. But when we become strong enough, then one is no longer subject to fall downs. And in the next purport to verse 931, then Prabhupada says that because the process of chanting Hare Krishna or remembering Krishna is fixed in the heart of a devotee, even if he does something wrong, he doesn't need to do some kind of prayaschita. He doesn't need to do some kind of purificatory process, because the process for purifying him is already fixed in his heart. And therefore he says, therefore the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, should be continued without stoppage. And this will protect one from any accidental fall downs. Yes.
This is from Doyalu Gauradas. You mentioned...
From who?
Doyalu Gauradas.
Doyalu Gora. Oh, from Wales. Hare Krishna Doyalu Gora.
He says, you mentioned that one should learn to chant properly. What are the guiding steps by which one can go from namabhas to pure chanting? Is namabhas only performed in the mode of goodness?
No, namabhas means namabhas means almost chanting. Abhas. Abhas means almost chanting, not really chanting. Like if you chant by just some force of good luck, like you see Hare Krishnas walking down the street, and you call out to them, "Hey, Hares! Hey, Hare Krishna!" and you're making fun of them. But you say the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, but you're not thinking that you're going to purify yourself, or you're not thinking of anything actually, you're just making fun. But the holy name is so powerful that that's namabhas, that will give you the ability. Liberation means the ability to follow the principles strictly. But pure love of God is only attained in loving devotional service. Pure love of God is only attained by offenseless chanting. The love of God is there in everyone's heart. It's not something that has to be brought in, imported from somewhere else. It's already there. It just has to be awakened. And it's the Lord's causeless mercy that He arranges things. You know, you go and you stay in a Ramada Inn, and you check in, you say, and you look at you're going down there, oh look, there's the Ramada Inn, let's go stay there. And you innocently just say Ramada, then you've got Rama, you've chanted Rama's name, and you get benefit, namabhas benefit. But then you can, from that platform, you can fall down from that platform. But from prema, I mean, it's possible that you don't. There's still a chance for you to fall down as long as you're in the material world, until you actually achieve not just prema, but the realization of Krishna face to face, and when the process of vastu siddhi, or the actual service begins personally, then there's no chance of falling down. That's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Madhurya Kadambini. You can't pretend. You can't act like you're renounced or act like you're a devotee, and at the same time in your mind be looking for sense gratification and karmendriyani samyamya yaaste manasas smaran. You're acting like you're a devotee, but manasas smaran, in your mind you're looking for the object of the senses, and you're using the position of being a devotee and the activities of devotional service in order to get something for yourself. That is called vimuda, self-deluded, mityachara, so uchite, that's pretension. So we can't be pretension. That's what we mean when we said before, without ulterior motives, without pretension.
Nothing from Rati Manjari.
Rati, Haribo, long time no hear.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you for another uplifting reading. Today is Akshaya Tritiya. Could you please give us some elaboration?
No idea. I got no idea about Akshaya Tirtha. You got to go somewhere else and find that out. I'm a completely lowly creature. I have no idea about the details of Akshaya Tirtha. Did you give me a down arrow? A down? Thumbs down?
I think it's something about new beginnings or something, but we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are books that are written about the different ekadasis and how they mean different things, but generally speaking, those things are coming from the platform of smarta, rules and regulations. They're not coming from pure devotional service. They're when you do things to get something, or do some special thing on a special day to give the special favor or something like that. But we're chanting Hare Krishna at least 16 rounds a day. Some of us are chanting more every single day. And that puts us beyond these things. Sometimes we may use it as a, preaching tool to get some donations into the hundi, into the temple hundi or something, or into the, what do they call that? The electronic ETF, electronic transfer of funds, or something like that. But generally speaking, it's a pious activity, but it's not pure devotional service.
There's another part to the question in response to what you just said.
Really?
Yeah.
From Rati?
Mm-hmm.
Good for you, Rati. Go ahead. Lay it on me.
There's two follow-up things. One says, does that mean that it is not so important? And could this be another deviation?
Yes. Next. Could be a deviation, but then again, if you're Vaisheshika Prabhu and you're using it to, distribute millions of transcendental literatures, in that way, then it could be pure devotional service. Everything has to do with consciousness. It's not a formulaic, or what's the word? Yeah, formulaic. There's no material formulas. Depends on our consciousness. The same person may doing it be exactly the same thing, and it may look like material, but it's been done right consciousness, then it's spiritual. But most people who do those kinds of things, at least in the Hindu culture, are trying to get something for themselves, generally. You know, we're sannyasis, and sometimes we sit there and people come and they say, "Oh, please bless me," and they touch your feet and all those kinds of things. But what they just want is some cheap blessing. They don't want, the blessing is in the instruction. The blessing is the instruction how to become, a pure devotee, and not to get some benefit, cure your father's disease or get a good grade in a course, or, Of course, if one is praying for pure devotional service, that's not a material desire, that's a spiritual desire. That's a spiritual desire, devotional desire. So we can't give up desires, so we just have to purify our desires. We're letting Rati have the last word, because I just went over my quota by 15 minutes. There's something else?
One other question from Rati Manjari.
Rati, go ahead. All right, go ahead.
She says, does the law of attraction, which is popular in New Age circles, actually exist?
Does the law of attraction, which exists in New Age circles, actually exist? I don't understand what the question even means. I don't even understand what it means. Does the law of attraction actually exist? What does that mean? No idea. There's Sangha. There's the association. You acquire the qualities of what or who you associate with. If that's what they mean by law of attraction, I don't even know what it means. What you mean by the law of attraction? Used in New Age groups. I don't know. I don't contact New Age groups. I don't know what they mean, what they're doing.
The attraction is if you thinking positive, you attract positive, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's part of the law of nature. But that doesn't, you have to know what positive is and what negative is. If you don't know what positive is, what is good and what is bad, that's why knowledge is required. You have to know what you're doing. You can't it's not just sentiment.
Well, there's a follow-up from Dialogue Gora. Should we make this the last one? Or?
Yeah.
Also from Dialogue Gora, I experience shame and embarrassment sometimes due to distraction and chanting, and then sometimes it's less so. Is this shame in effect namabas?
Is the shame namabas? No. Matsamo nasti papatma napadadi nikaschana pari hare pilajja me kim bruve purushottama. O Purushottama, there is no sinner or offender as bad as I am. How can I describe my shame? That's pure devotional service. These kinds of questions, they're loaded questions, because I don't know what it is, but sometimes devotees, it's almost as if they're trying to get permission to do something that's not quite right and to get it justified by a spiritual authority. But it sounds manufactured to me, that thought. Is the shame, what was it? Is the shame...
Is the shame an effect of namabas?
Is the shame an effect of namabas? Where have you ever read that? I've never read that the shame is effect of namabas. Namabhas is generally when you chant unknowingly, innocently, but not purposefully to glorify Krishna. Or it can be defined as the clearing stage. So the shame isn't namabhas. The namabhas is when you, just by chance, chant Hare Krishna properly, or chant Hare Krishna, chant the syllables of the holy name, even unknowingly. Or if you're chanting, and you're making offenses, and you come to the stage where you begin to catch yourself. Well, to catch yourself, you have to know what the offenses are. And if you catch yourself making an offense and then you feel bad about it, and you stop making the offense, that's the clearing stage. Or, better yet, if you catch yourself before you're making one and stop and don't make it, that's clearing stage.
I just wonder whether he's thinking something along the lines of, when Ajamil had his second chance, and the
Ajamil chanted repeatedly the Lord's name innocently, without trying to purify himself from his sinful life. So even though he was sinful, he was chanting the name of Narayana repeatedly, because he got a benefit from his previous training. He was a Brahmin and had a spiritual master, and he was trained. And then he fell down with the prostitute, and then he did all kinds of sinful activities. But he chanted the name of Narayana, not trying to become free from the sin. He chanted it innocently. And by the repeated chanting of that name innocently, he became eligible to chant at the time of death. And then the Yamadutas came, and then the Vishnudutas came and saved him. But he still had to go back into his body and go to Hardwar and perform pure devotional service before he went back to Godhead. He didn't go back to Godhead instantaneously.
But it's described that after he came to, after being delivered the first time by the Vishnudutas, he felt ashamed of his past activities.
Yes. You must. If you don't feel ashamed, if you feel it, that's why I chanted that verse. Matsamo nasti papatma, naparadi nakaschana, parihare pilajjame, kim bruve purushotama. The pure devotee thinks like that, even if he's completely free from bad activities. He thinks like that by nature. Pure devotee by nature is regretful of anything that he's done sinfully, and who hasn't done sinful activity in the material world. So yes, the feeling of regret for having done something wrong, that's not the same as Nambas chanting, but that's a consciousness that, helps to purify us. And with that, I will bid thee adieu. Hare Krishna, all glories to the devotees of the Lord who ask such wonderful questions. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Haribol. See you tomorrow right here in the Hythe Yatra. Another word for Hythe in Hungarian is haven. It's become a transcendental haven because we're reading the Bhagavatam every day in this place. See you tomorrow again, 7 o'clock, without fail. Hare Krishna.